Hello, welcome to the UAS Ketchikan Campus Library. I'm Kathy Bowling. I manage the library. And tonight I'm managing it by myself for this week because Lana Clark is out. She usually does the broadcasting piece of it. And we just updated to Windows 11, and when I got on this morning, it etch-a-sketched a bunch of our stuff. So this is going to be, could be glitchy or could be great. Either way, it's going to be great.
It's going to be great.
It's going to be great.
Great, yeah.
And I did want to tell you that you can get a library card here at the UAS Ketchikan Campus Library. We are open to the public. We are part of the Alaska Library Catalog, which means you have access to 3 million other titles, many of those that live in the other UAA and UAF libraries. So it's a really great resource that we have here in Ketchikan. Also, tomorrow night, it's a busy week for us, UAS is leading Trivia on Tap at the Alaska Legends Cidery. It's a general knowledge trivia, and it's a lot of fun. And if you are in the winning team, you get a UAS trivia diploma. Yes. So, and diplomas are good. You know who has diplomas? Our presenters tonight. We have Dr. Charmaine Lewis. She's the Assistant Professor of Science, Arts and Sciences, Natural Sciences. Okay. And probably most of you know Barbara Morgan. She's an instructor of community education and career education. And her life goal is to understand everything that lives and grows and walks and flies and
all the
crawls.
things right here. Everything.
Whether you can eat them or not, which is important.
It is important
to have. So there's the clicker. This should work.
Okay.
And, just so you know, also we are live streaming this. So the camera is only up here. If you have a question, you don't want your voice on the live stream, you can let me know. I'll be back there. Let me know the question, and I'll be happy to ask it. Okay, so welcome.
Welcome. Charmaine and I are going to be actually kind of tag team a little bit. I'm going to start out like the first half or so of the presentation, and then Charmaine will be doing the second half of the presentation, except that if anybody has any questions that like I can't answer or she'll answer, we're going to like trade off a little bit. So anyway.
And yeah, we were hoping that this would be a more informal type presentation, that please interrupt and ask the questions in the middle of it. So you don't have to wait for your questions all the way at the end, because we find that sometimes then you forget your question. So please just interrupt us in the middle.
Yeah. Then we won't have to go back to whatever slide that was that had the graphic that you wanted to ask a question about. So yeah, great. Thank you. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with, is this our PowerPoint here? Green Crab Invasion. This is us. Yay! It's working. A community action approach to resilience against invasive species in southern Southeast Alaska. So our focus really is on southern Southeast Alaska, because that's where this invasive species is currently in Alaska. I'm gonna give like the background information of basically where they came from, how to identify them, how they got here. And then Charmaine's going to talk about a class that we taught that had basically that same title and what we found during that class. So European green crab, and the scientific name is Carcinus marinus. They are called, the common name is European green crab. There's a few predators that are actually pretty successful against them. Sea otters do eat them. There's a paper that's out that the sea otters in Elkhorn Slough in California really target them. That's kind of a really different geographic sort of an area though, and they may or may not actually eat a lot of green crabs in other areas, but they have good overlap of their ranges in that area, and so the sea otters eat them. People have suggested, well, if they're a problem, maybe we should just like let the sea otters take care of it, but the sea otters can also like eat too much stuff and be a problem as well. So mink and marten hopefully will. We don't really know what might predate on them in Alaska yet, because they're a pretty new species here. They tolerate a really wide range of environmental parameters, so they can tolerate pretty cold water, pretty darn warm water, saline water, not very saline water. You can find them actually very near freshwater streams in some areas. So they are really successful invasive species because they are able to tolerate so many different environmental conditions, and they are really, really good predators. They can catch and eat a lot of things. And this is a European green crab right here. So you will notice that they is kind of greenish in color. They're not always green in color though, so that's not the very best characteristic to focus on. Here is kind of a graphic that shows just how well they do in these different environmental conditions. So water temperature, it's going to be a driver of how far north they can expand. On warmer years, like this last year was an El Nino year, and the year before was an El Nino year, and we are seeing a big jump in how far north they've managed to get with the warmer water. So depending on how warm the water is up in like South Central and around like the Alaska Peninsula and above the Aleutian Chain, they may or may not be able to get above the Aleutian Chain. Not really quite sure just yet. Water salinity, they can tolerate fresh water, they can tolerate kind of marine. They will go in the intertidal area, down into like subtidal area. They kind of really like the mid-intertidal area quite a lot. That's kind of where they spend quite a lot of time. They will be in areas that have a low water energetics, kind of, so really pretty calm water. They can also tolerate pretty rough water as well. So a lot of other species have real narrow parameters that they can tolerate, but they're like anything goes. They can handle it. They are a threat because they're aggressive and destructive. They destroy eelgrass beds, which is a nice little video here that Charmaine found. It's like, yay, it works. Showing an eelgrass bed, they will tear up eelgrass, and sometimes they'll eat the base part of the eelgrass, sometimes they rip it up. And that's a problem because eelgrass is where you find crabs, right? If you go in to find Dungeness crabs, you're going to go find the eelgrass. A lot of other species also use it, especially in their juvenile stages. So juvenile salmon will use eelgrass beds as kind of protection. So ripping up the eelgrass is destroying habitat for different things that we want to have. This is kind of how you can, like an ID picture here too, is that in between the eyes, let me see if I can figure out this. I'm going to push something that's going to make it. So the eyes are here and here. There's 3 bumps in between the eyes, and then 5 big spines on either side of the front of the carapace. And the spines are the best way actually to identify them because other species of crabs are green, and these guys aren't always green. We don't really, the biggest threat, I think, besides destroying habitat, is that they will catch and eat juvenile salmon, and they can beat up on and eat juvenile Dungeness crabs that are smaller than them. They only get about 4 inches across, but Dungeness are smaller than that when they're young. Yes?
Is it also true that they're really fast?
They are pretty, yeah, they're fast. And they're
Faster
kind of
than our
long,
crabs?
yeah. They have a little bit longer legs too, and they're pretty fast. They can catch things. They're fast enough to catch a salmon that's swimming by, little like salmon fry. So, yeah. Okay, I'm not sure why. Did we click out of something? It's not working here for.
No?
Okay, there we go.
Okay.
So this is where they are. The blue shows where they normally have, that's their native range, is much of Europe and kind of down into northern Africa a little bit, which kind of gives you an idea of their temperature range tolerance as well, because the northern part of Europe is definitely a lot colder water than down in northern Africa is. So that's where they have come from. They have been introduced to all the places that are red. So you notice that both the east and west coast of North America, there in the United States, we have them on both coasts, right? Down in South America, the southern tip of Africa, over in Australia, there's populations. The black places are where they were confirmed that they had the black dots. They were introduced there, but they did not succeed. So you can kind of see that sort of like closer to the equator. The water does eventually get too warm for them to succeed, it seems. The green areas are all the places where given their environmental condition tolerance, those are the places where it is potential for them to be able to expand their range into. They are very successful. They've got local distribution now, patchy, but still. They're on the 100 worst invasive species of the whole world right now. The list of the 100 worst invasive species, they're on that. They're one of the worst ones.
Is that black dot on the right, is that Hawaii?
I think so. Why is awfully warm there? So I think that is what that is. Not, yeah, I'm used to thinking of Hawaii on I think it's Hawaii.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is their life cycle, right? We think of the crabs as being like an adult phase crab right there, but then when they lay eggs, which they can do 2 full life, they can do 2 reproductive cycles in a year. So females can reproduce twice in a summer, right? When they reproduce, the larvae, when the eggs hatch out into zoea, they're waterborne, they're up in the water column, planktonic phase. They can stay in the water column for 3 months. So anything in the water column, anything that's planktonic is at the mercy of the ocean currents. And so they can get pushed by the ocean currents for 3 months before then they settle out. The megalopa stage is also in the ocean, correct? Yeah. So the megalopa stage is also in the ocean, and then they will settle out wherever they got to in that 3-month period of time when they're doing their growing in the ocean, which is how they got here. The current range in North America is kind of this grayed out kind of part in here, and you can see that they were introduced into the East Coast in 1817, kind of expanded since then. Got to the East Coast in ballast water from ships that came over from Europe. Then probably got over to the West Coast by the fact that live shellfish was packed in seaweed that may have had the larval forms of the green crab in the seaweed nobody knew. And then when that live lobster, whatever, got over to San Francisco Bay, they threw the seaweed in the ocean because that's where seaweed belongs, right? They were introduced, though, however, that probably through that mechanism, into San Francisco Bay in 1980. And there's the Japanese current that comes across the Pacific and hits North America and splits, and half of it comes up the coast, past Northern California, Oregon, Washington, British Columbia, and right past us, too. So that current that's been pushing up, it's a conveyor belt right now. It's pushing things up here. They've been able to, 3 month stages at a time, be jumping up the coast and establishing new populations of the green crabs. So they are spread all the way up the coast. And people who have been kind of paying attention to this have known that the day was going to come when they got here, and that day is here. I've been actually aware of this problem since 2007 when I first started working for the university here, and Gary Freitag is he's retired, but then he was the Sea Grant and Marine Advisory person here, and he was telling me that, and I'm like, what in the heck, what? And I helped him with some of the monitoring work that he was doing for a couple of summers, and then we weren't finding anything, so it's okay, maybe, some people were hoping that Dixon entrance would be wide enough and deep enough that they wouldn't be able to get across Dixon entrance, but that didn't in fact end up being the case. So they have been pushed up past Dixon entrance, and they're now here. So first found in the Net Island Reserve in Tamgis Bay in 2022, and for that year, then they started trapping them, and they caught 773 that first year. Next year, they started year-round trapping instead of just doing during the summer months, more or less. Detections expanded, but only in Tamgis Bay, and they harvested 2,133 total specimens for the year. 2024, they found 3 new sites on Annette Island. They found many, many young of the year in September. So those are the ones that are really newly settled out, really small. 1,865 total specimens last year. 2025, the 33,000 that's listed there was a couple weeks ago, and they're still catching 700,000, 800,000, 900,000 a day right now. So in that 2 weeks, that 33,000 is now old news, and it's probably getting close to 40,000 for the summer. So they are also going to other like nearby areas. They have found 260 plus live individuals that were removed from areas like on Gravina Island and Prince of Wales Island that is close kind of by in that island where they can fairly easily get to those places. Where the beaches that they're able to get to pretty easily on Prince of Wales Island, every beach that they've gone to, they have found crabs. They've found the green crabs, and they've been harvesting them. Some places they're like thick enough they can just like, they call it hand picking. You don't need a crab pot. You can just bend over and pick them up and catch them. A lot of them are pretty little. They haven't gotten very big yet, but they're catching a lot. They have, they said about 100 pots at a time in various different places, and they've rotated through them, but still, close to 10,000 traps now. They have 5+ dedicated field staff that is working only on trying to catch as many green crabs as they possibly can. So that's kind of an alarming trend.
In other places, like Washington, when they first got there, was it a similar like exponential trend, and then did it level off somewhere hopefully coming soon, or did it just for them?
There is some variation in how many they catch each year. This, like I was saying, like El Nino years, the last couple of years, so the water was warmer. They're catching a lot more again this year. It was a few years ago, 3 or 4 years ago or something, 5 years ago maybe, the state of Washington had to like declare an emergency, and they shut down the Dungeness crab fishery, and that was because they were catching so many green crabs, and the green crabs was having such a bad effect on the Dungeness that they declared a state of emergency and shut down the Dungeness fishery, and that then freed up, since it was an emergency, it freed up funding so that they could just really do mass trapping to try to get the populations down. And they have a network there of various different governmental groups and native groups of people, various corporations, not all corporations, but various different kinds of native groups, et cetera, that are all working really, really hard to keep the populations down there. And then there's still, warmer water, and then we have more to contend with. So, one bit of like more positive news is that in Alaska, we noticed right away, and we're starting to do something right away. On the East Coast, I am on the Alaska Invasive Species Partnership, and specifically the Southern Southeast European Green Crab Subcommittee. And one of the people that we were talking to was aware of what was going on the East Coast. And they didn't do anything on the East Coast for 20 years after they found them. They just like let them go pretty much until they're like, wait, they're killing everything. We need to do something. And then they started. So this person was, thumbs up to people in Alaska, and specifically like in that island, for starting to do something immediately so that we can try to keep a lid on it, basically. So, because they're leveling off, and we can hope. Yeah.
I think, just to jump in, I think at least the East Coast, well, I'm sure the East Coast, but even Washington, British Columbia, there's like never any hope that you're going to actually fully eradicate these. That's just not in the realm of reality, given their life cycle and
How successful they are.
and especially here, how much coastline we have, But the hope is to keep their populations, keep them stressed out enough, and the populations dampened enough that they don't really take a foothold.
Functional eradication is the hope, is to like figure out the areas. So like an example here, Bostwick, we don't want to have them taking over Bostwick. So if we were able to like do mass trapping there often enough to keep the population low enough, then Bostwick would still be good Dungeness crab habitat. So, for example, that's the hope, is to have regional effort to be going into keeping all the different regions that people want to keep safe throughout Southeast Alaska, really targeted the trapping to keep the crabs down to a point where they won't be a big problem in those special areas, those really great areas. So this is a net island. Tamgus Harbor's right here, and you'll notice that most little dots are right along there, and then a couple over on, this, but they're all in this one peninsula part. And that's 2024. Over here, 2025 is more sites on this smaller peninsula part, a site deeper in Tamgus Harbor, and then all the way around the island as well. It's like way more new sites, like double the sites and all the way around the island, which kind of makes sense with what we're finding here as well. So not only more individual crabs, but also more sites that they're finding there. And I want to just mention too is that both of these slides I just used with information about Metlakatla I got from Ian Hudson and Janelle Winter, and was given permission to use them tonight because what they're doing there, what they're finding is such an important part of the whole story that they were happy to have me use this information. So
I have a question.
yeah.
Has anyone come up with any type of, or is there some commercial use for these crabs?
Yes.
Okay.
There is commercial use. On the East Coast, they will hold them when they're getting close to molting, so that when they molt them in soft shell stakes, they can harvest them then and use them as a soft shell crab. They cook them whole and whatnot.
So they're feeding.
In Metlakatla, they are composting them and turning them into compost, which they put into the community garden. Other uses I've known people to do is to dry them and turn them into dog treats. There's a place on the East Coast that uses them to flavor some whiskey. I'm not sure how tasty that would be.
Interesting.
Might be a little strange.
I was just wondering because possibly getting the commercial aspect
Going on, yeah.
blown up higher would help
Situation.
get them caught.
Okay, so here we go back. I got ahead of myself earlier, but they're not always green. They can be yellow, red, orange, green, or a mix of those colors. And looking for the 5 spines on either side, like I was saying, and the 3 bumps between the eyes is the best way to identify them. This is how important careful ID really is, because on the left is a European green crab. You can see them with the 5 big spines here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that bumps between the eyes, but the color is identical to a green shore crab. And it only has 3 little spines on each side and no bumps between the eyes. The eyes are also set further apart. The green crab has a narrower base to the carapace. Most of the people that think that they are seeing a green crab on the beaches around here, because they're all over, they're not all over around here yet, but most of what they think are green crabs are the green shore crabs, not the European green crab. And it's understandable why they're confused. Other species have been sent thinking, people think that their green crab are the shore crabs, the helmet crabs, and the kelp crabs are all kind of greenish, but they're not the green crab. So making sure you have correct identification is really important. One of the things we've done this summer is to put together, and I've got actually a handout, you can take this with you, is the Southeast Alaska Crab Carapace ID guide with examples of the green crab and then some of the other most common crab carapaces you'd find in the area, which is kind of a handy way of being able to check. I printed it on Write in the Rain paper so that it's a little more durable. And then the other thing that we developed with help actually from somebody from CASC. CASC gave us some funding, which Charmaine's going to talk about in a minute, but the Climate Adaptation Science Center, they had a person there to help with this, because one of the things that people tell me is, I found all these dead crabs, not recognizing the fact that crabs shed their shell as they grow. They can't grow, the hard shell doesn't grow. So they shed the shell and have a soft shell, which is what you can eat them in soft shell stage at that point. But what they do then is that they will absorb as much water as they can to stretch that new soft shell and then deposit calcium carbonate in it to harden it. So a lot of what people think is dead crabs is actually just the empty shell that they leave behind when they molt. You do occasionally find dead crabs. They're heavy because the meat is all still inside of them, and often really smelly because it's rotting. Okay, so there's a copy of this in the back there. People can grab a copy of this as well if they'd like to. Is it dead or did it shed? Probably shed. In order to do any of the work that we've been kind of doing, with any of the monitoring work, any of the stuff that, like going out and seeing how many are here and collecting the carapaces and such, you have to have permits. This is an invasive species, and the state of Alaska has any number of laws and whatnot saying basically you cannot collect invasive species, you cannot move them around, because in general we don't want invasive species moved around, right? So you cannot actually go out and harvest any green crabs. You're not supposed to kill them. If you find them, you're not supposed to kill them because they're invasive species and it falls underneath those blanket rules. If you want to do the carapace surveys, and that's one of the ways to monitor, is to be doing the carapace surveys, see what kind of empty shells are around, because if you find the empty shells on the beach, you know that that beach has the green crabs. You have to have permits to do that work though. And if you want to keep a shell so that you can show people what that looks like, you have to have a whole separate permit. And then anyway, so the whole permitting process, and the Fish and Game website is the place to go in order to know what permits you need to have in order to do the work if you want to be held. A molt walk is one of the easiest ways to go out and see if a beach has the green crab shells. Because like I said, they molt and that shell is left behind and it will eventually drift up to the high tide line. This is looking at not just the green crab, which is up in the upper right hand corner, but also 8 of the other more common different kinds of crabs that we have in the area here, so that by doing the molt walks, we're not only documenting the spread of the green crab, we're also documenting what is here before the green crabs, or like right as when the green crabs are here, which gives us baseline data of kinds of species, abundance of those, how many of them there are, which we can use to compare to in the future to see how much of a change the green crabs are having on the normal crabs that we normally have around here. So I'm going to hand
Ready to hand off the
a
baton?
freshly charged baton
Thank you.
to Charmaine.
Thanks, Barbara. Yeah, and so I guess before I jump into my spot, my part, I just wanted to also add, Barbara had mentioned she's been, aware of the European green crab as an invasive species and been connected in and working on it since 2007. I just started with UAS in 2021 and basically was aware of this being a potential threat. But really, I've just jumped in this last year, and mainly as a big cheerleader for Barbara. I'm a big fan of the work that she does, and I wanted to support her. And so I went after money, basically. And so that was kind of my piece in it. And so that's what I wanted to talk to you was about this class that we got funded. Barbara mentioned our funding group, which is the Alaska Climate Adaptation Science Center. So the acronym for that is CASC. And they were the ones that provided us money to be able to bring especially European green crab identification skills to the Ketchikan community here. So we ran this class in June, just this summer, and like I said, our big goal was to help folks understand what a European green crab is. As Barbara mentioned, it's really easy to confuse native species with the invasive species. So we were hoping to kind of spread that training, and then also start doing molt walks and collecting data and entering that data kind of throughout both the road system in Ketchikan, and also we were able to use some of the funding to get a charter boat through Allen Marine and go up George and Carroll Inlets. So we had originally suspected that that might be one of the first places that we might see the European green crab. since it's, on those more southern than us, the currents coming up. So a group of us went out and did this work. We trained community folks, members. It was really a fun class because we had a group of folks that come from diverse backgrounds. Some were current students, some had never been a student for UAS, just interested community members. Got a couple of folks still in the crowd today that were with us this June too. And some of these photos that you're seeing is just the group out at these different beach sites looking for those crab carapace shells. And not just the European green crab, but also, again, those native species to get a snapshot of what naturally exists without the pressures from the invasive crab yet. And you can kind of see the top leftmost image is just baggies full of all of these crab carapace shells that we had to count and identify, enter that data to Department of Fish and Game's site. And then to the right, the uppermost right image here, you've got some shed crab carapace shells. And what I was trying to show with this image is it's up in the grass. So what you may not be aware of if you decide to go out and do these molt walks, the high tide line isn't always as obvious as you might think. So some of our beaches here in the road system, we see like a rack line in the high tide line. So you have seaweed and shells and driftwood and human garbage and whatever, and it kind of accumulates at, kind of the top of the beach. Well, in this case, a lot of it can actually be up in the vegetation. So you are all very familiar with our tides, I'm sure, here, and we get those big ones. And the lightweight crab shells can kind of end up much further up the beach than what you might picture. So if you do decide to go out, keep your eyes peeled even further up the beach than you might imagine, and even up in the grass. So we need keen eyes for sometimes spotting some of these crab carapace shells. So I included this slide just to remind everyone this is outdoor work, field work, and we had both successes and challenges in implementing this class. I would say on the whole, mostly it was successes. Folks really had a good time. They learned a lot about identifying crab species, both the invasive species and the native species. But obviously, our beaches are not always super easy to access, nor are they very easy to walk around on. So for example, that kind of upper image to the left there is the edge of the Allen Marine boat that we chartered, and luckily they have kind of a ramp system that comes down. Probably lots of you have seen the boats out and about in the summertime doing their tours, but it allows us to kind of come up real close to the shoreline and throw people off the boat in a safe enough manner, and then we had to clamber over rocks and things and try to get into habitat that might be European green crab conducive. And that being said, though, there were some sites that we were wishing we had canoes, on the larger motorboat that we could then get in the canoe and go through the narrow passageway, because depending on tide, you may or may not be able to access it. So yeah, our shorelines are not the easiest to get to as far as trying to monitor for these crabs. So more, again, respect and thanks to the Metlakatla team that's been going out and kind of doing this in some of those areas. And so the result of this class, it's interesting, the first few days, everyone's like real gung-ho, and your enthusiasm maybe peters as day after day after day. We're just finding native crabs, which is a good thing, but no sighting of the European green crab. Well, on the last day that we held the class and we're out doing the field work monitoring for it, we did find 2 carapace shells here off the road system on Refuge Beach. So that ended up being the very last day that we were conducting the class. So that kind of put a damper on things a little bit. It was a success in the sense that the course was a success, that we brought in community members and we found evidence for northward migration of this invasive species, but also kind of a bummer. And you can see how small too, with the fingers and just in the baggie here, quite small size carapace. And then since then, as the summer progressed along, so that was in June, in August, live crabs have now been found in 2 spots in Ketchikan, and this was by Keenan Sanderson and his Ocean Science Bowl team. We're also here today, and so they were able to find 2 live crabs, one in Mud Bay and one in Saxman and Seaport, and these are Keenan's photos with his permission shared here. So that's, evidence that, because one thing with the carapace shells is, when we were discussing this when we found them on refuge in June, of course, they can also move by currents and by ocean movement and whatever, so finding the live crabs is like, kind of seals the deal that yes, for sure, they are here. Yeah. And also, to pause again, the real, I think, positive in a way piece that Barbara and I have experienced this whole summer has been this idea of the community coming together, and we've talked together with you guys too earlier about how Washington has had a successful model in that way, that they've got government entities, university entities, tribal entities, community members, everybody coming together under a unifying cause, and it's made a difference for them. They've positively been able to keep the numbers in check in Washington, and that's our hope here for Southeast Alaska. And so it's pretty awesome to have.
And we are having that, I want to really jump on that too, is just to say, Keenan, thank you for sharing this and you guys have been continuing to work with this. We've been working with KIC and different people coming in, working with us in different, we've got like people from the class that are really still, Maria Dudzak was one of our super monitors. She went out and just did so many, and she found a couple of the green crabs, not very many, but she did a lot of the surveys. So we have a group of people here, people from Fish and Game, people from Forest Service, working with CTOR at Sitka. We already have that framework coming together of so many different community groups in the university and whatnot, working together, addressing this issue here. So we just need to keep that momentum going.
Yeah, and the collaborative efforts. I think it's really nice to see, because we're all humans, right? It's not always as collaborative as you might hope. But this so far, our experience has been very collaborative, and we're really appreciative of that. And so this image is from Alaska Department of Fish and Game, from September 26th, I think is the date that the state is representing. So each of the little green crab kind of cartoon figures is just showing confirmed presence of the crab. And the main reason we included this, because all those sites around Ketchikan, that's what we're talking about this whole evening, but the northernmost spot is right now is Myers Chuck. So that's kind of across from Thorn Bay on Prince of Wales there, and the Wrangleboro,
Cleveland Peninsula.
Cleveland Peninsula, yeah.
Right across Pine Street from Thorn Bay, basically.
So
there's 2 shells found there this summer.
Right. So that's as far north as we know for sure, and that could change in the next weeks, even really, since it seems to be going quickly.
So this is like some of each.
Yeah.
Both. Some of each. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and then like the northernmost case, the northernmost ones is Myers Chuck, and that is 2 carapaces that were found in front. I have friends there, and I said, keep an eye out. And so they found 2 shells right on the beach in front of their house. The northernmost, kind of block of live crabs have been found. Early September, they did a mass, 100 crab pots in the water in Kasan Bay, right in front on the big beach in Kasan. Soaked them for 2 days, checked them each morning, right, and caught 33 live crabs there. And so that was disappointing. I just learned that last Friday was that they caught 33 live crabs in Kasan Bay just in early September. So they will be, I would guess if they don't find them in Wrangell or Petersburg next year, I'm going to be pretty surprised, actually.
Especially there's so much habitat up in the Wrangell.
Yes.
That muddy, shallow, mud flats, and that's, they love. I guess in Washington, I know Tammy Davis, our invasive species expert for Alaska Department of Fish and Game, she was telling us down in Washington when they're setting traps, they're in mud. They're in waders, but they're in mud, almost up to their chest, and that's where they're finding them. It's in this really deep mud. And it makes me think Rainbow area.
There's a lot of that around, and that was actually around, so we have found them in the Ketchikan area on like pretty much all the beaches from Heron Cove to Settlers Cove. The biggest number of them we found at Mud Bay was like 38 shells we found there. And that's, I mean, ideal crab habitat, it's like exactly what you're saying, it's like this mud flat, just, yeah. So that was a hard day finding 38 shells, and I'm like, oh, no. Yeah, so, yeah.
So, starting to sort of wrap this up, and then obviously time for more questions. Kind of where is UAS going next? Anyways, Barbara and I both really felt like, because again, we've got so many community partners working on this problem from different angles, and so I'm a big believer in, you know, there can always be too many cooks in the kitchen sometimes, and so I think it's best to come at it with what our expertise is, and our expertise is education. I mean, that's what we do, and so our hope is to keep offering more European green crab classes to the community, keep training people up on identification and the molt walks, how to enter data, how to, you know, send that to Fish and Game and other entities. We are going to be distributing more educational materials, such as some of the stuff that Barbara mentioned earlier. We've got in the back of the classroom. Feel free to take those with you, and we'll have a larger distribution hopefully in a few months. And then doing presentations like this one, the public presentations and professional conferences, things like that, to keep spreading the word. And then all of these, you know, community collaborators and different entities are in collaboration with Alaska Department of Fish and Game to ultimately go to the Board of Fish. And, you know, the idea being, like Barbara was mentioning, I think when we were having some technical difficulties on the East Coast, they're using this as a food source, right, for dogs or for whiskey or for humans, for various things. Currently, the Metlakatla community mainly is, my brain just like, thank you, I was like mulch, the word mulch. But yeah, composting them, you know, for garden purposes and things like that, which is a great use for them too. But you can envision, I'm sure, where if you eventually set up enough, you know, proper regulations and get people trained, just like they do for salmon and any other species that we harvest, you could have folks harvesting them. But that there's procedures, right, for that, and there's steps for that to happen, and so that's kind of the ultimate goal of the community is coming together to talk about that stuff. And then continuing to monitoring, and that's a huge piece for everybody in the room today. If you're interested in doing molt walks or even the live crab walks, it's needed, and we'd be happy to point you in the direction of either ourselves that can help you feel confident in doing that on your own, or, you know, point you toward other people too that are doing that.
Do you have to have a limit though?
You do. It's free, and it's, you know, it's available online. It's not difficult to
Right.
print and fill out, you know, and fill out. Yeah, it's pretty easy. It's on the Fish and Game website. Yeah. And I think with the last slide that we have here for you all this evening is just some acknowledgement of some more resources that are available for you, and our big thanks and acknowledgement to our funding agencies and some of the community partners that have been working closely with us. And thank you guys for listening and for helping to spread the word to the community, and kind of, you know, hopefully we can not have an East Coast type situation here, and hopefully we can have more of a situation where we keep the population numbers low enough that they don't really impact our native species. Thank you.
If they get into an eelgrass bed and destroy it, do you know how long it would take for that to recover if the numbers are kept down, or does it not come back?
It can come back. Eelgrass has a hard time coming back anyway, so it would depend on if it was continuing to be impacted by the green crabs or if it was allowed to recover. Kind of how badly it was destroyed too. It's kind of, yeah.
So part of what they do, I don't know, maybe you're aware, but they kind of like they dig, because they eat clams too. So they dig down for shellfish species, and they're really, I think you were asking about fast. They're good. They're faster, efficient in it. And so they actually uproot the eelgrass itself. You know, I mean, they're literally like
Ripping it out.
It reminds me of my dogs in my garden. You know, like ripping out like the plant by the root, and then it's, you know, doesn't.
Not a question, but I think it was really good that you guys put the context with the numbers that are coming out of Metlakatla, but I'd like to provide another piece of context. Haida Gwaii, which is it's a bigger island archipelago on the Canadian side of the border. And it's roughly about 1,500 miles of coastline down there, and then Southeast Alaska has about 15,000 roughly. They've had their first green crab detection in 2020. As of right now, they're like approaching 2 million harvested down in that area. So it's a somewhat smaller area than Southeast Alaska, but they're getting so many, and that's one of the fears that I have with Southeast Alaska in particular, just because there's so much coastline that we don't really have access to. We're going to be there's probably so many more crab out there than you can even think of, just because nobody's looking, or not nobody's looking, but not many people are looking or trapping.
And that's a good point. There is a lot of places to look. And so one of the things I've mentioned again and again is that the first place that they were found was on an island in Tamdis Harbor, but that's not necessarily the first population that was established in Alaska. It was just the first we found. And there's so much good habitat in Southeast Alaska, and we have so many miles. So I'm really glad we're getting started on conversations about what to do very early on in the process, and I'm hoping that we have lots of resources that get made available to be working on this issue. And part of that resources is the education portion of it. That's one of the things I feel like I can offer, is to help people understand what to be going and looking for. People know here in town that they can send me pictures of things and I'll identify them, not just green crabs. I like lots of things. They tag me on Facebook, they send me Facebook, which is a nice thing actually, because 4 of the new sites that we have this summer came from people sending me pictures saying, I think I found one of the bad ones. I'm like, you did, yeah, sorry, thank you for the information. And so that education and that connection with people is something that I can help with to really mobilize the forces needed to combat this. In having the funding to be able to do this class, and having, I'm glad I was knowing this was happening, and I told Charmaine, I said the university needs to be, we're an education place, right? That's what we do. We need to be part of this solution, and now we've been able to help out with that a little bit, and be one of the partners. And it's going to take a lot of partners and a lot of resources. Even if we were managed to kill every single one in the state of Alaska, the current that's coming up the coast from millions of crabs is going to continue pushing those larvae up the coast to us. So that's, yeah, it's not an easy thing to think about what might happen. So yeah.
Will you be doing another class?
We would like to do another class, and then like June, hopefully next summer. If through the winter time, Metlakatla tries to do like year round, but the weather starts getting a little icky too. So the season's really kind of winding down as far as being effective and going out. But in the springtime, like it's time to start going back out again. So hopefully we can offer a class in June again this next year. Yeah.
And it's a lot of monitoring. Is it mostly funding with all your partners that you see as the barrier to large-scale trapping?
It's going to require a lot of funding. Yes, and that's a really good, yeah. And
Like personnel time.
And we've talked about this in kind of like,
We have full-time jobs.
right.
Yeah, I'm teaching classes here, you know.
This is an extraordinarily busy week for me this week. And you too, I know, but you were asking about funding, and
Does that seem like that's the biggest barrier?
it is a barrier to that. This is not just a threat to like personal harvest or personal use. There's a huge economic threat too, because we have an economic basis in Dungeness crab fisheries and salmon fisheries as well. So once word got out, we've been finding them on the beach here. Over the course of like the June, I did, I think, 9 interviews in different publications throughout the state, because people were like, what? Because they're here, anyway, and they're spreading. So the word is getting out, and I hope that something is done soon about make a concerted effort to get out and have them, yeah.
I know one of our concerns, we only have 10 days
Yeah.
for the entire state of Alaska, or to look at invasive species, the Department of Fish and Game for plants, animals,
Yeah.
marine, freshwater, saltwater, the entire state. So
She spread very thin.
she's spread very thin. Washington State they've been doing this for 20 years. The funding right now, just for the state personnel, is $12 million. And that doesn't include all the money that comes from all the other partners that are working on it. So and most of the money actually for Washington State doesn't come from the state. But
Yeah.
they really do provide some good oversight there. So Alaska is really behind the 8 ball as far as funding invasive species. So that is something we need to advocate for.
Tony works for KIC as the, help me here,
Cultural Resource Director acting.
but, and also, but like you oversee like the environmental
Resource
research, yeah,
Management. I've
yeah,
got my
yeah.
fish and wildlife biologist, which we recently hired for the department, sitting in the back, and she's gonna be kind of taking the lead on our European green crab. Iphigenia arbortitis has been involved with you guys, she's
Yeah.
with our EPA program. She's gonna still be involved, but kind of stepped down as a.
We needed more
wildlife
help.
biologist.
Yay.
Yeah, so that's good, and we're sitting on a $500,000 grant we applied for like 2 years ago, that we're waiting to be released. It's just focused on European green crab for the next 2 years. And we have just wrapped up, yesterday, our partnership with Mountain Catla. So we had some funding and working in partnership with Mountain Catla, monitoring for the last couple of years as well. So we are interested in it. We have a tribal council member here. I know it's very much a concern moving forward. We're just trying to figure out how we can mobilize more resources and build a capacity to help address, mitigate the harms.
And then Keenan is here as well, I'm gonna get to a second here, but Keenan is with Plinkett and Haida, was with KIC with Plinkett and Haida, and also is the Ocean Science Bowl team coach, and it has been working, I mean, we've got some people that are really working on things, which is really, really terrific. Yeah.
So I have a two-parted question. My first question is, since we're not allowed to kill them, can anyone get a permit, and like, how would you do it? And the second part of that question is, if not, or if people don't really, like, what else could us as citizens do that maybe aren't as expertise
Right.
in the community?
That's an excellent question. And doing the moat walks, if you find one, you can always email me a picture. Tag me on Facebook, whatever. Get it to me, I'm happy to help with that. If you get a picture, if you're really pretty certain that what you've done is a green crab, get a GPS location, get that long on it. So we have an ID for that too. And Keenan and I have been talking about, the thing that needs to happen before people can like actually harvest them or kill them is that we need to bring up like proposed regulations before the Board of Fish that will allow, so there's a process in place to get that done. Apparently they only meet every 3 years. They met last year, but I've been told, I'm not sure if this is true, but there's a way of doing an expedited thing possibly. Ian's shaking his head no. So we would like to get proposed regulations in front of the Board of Fish so that there could be a harvest. And then people who know what they're doing can go out and harvest them, turn them into fish meal, whatever they want to do, crab meal, and be part of the solution too. So.
Yeah, so for the Board of Fish, under extenuating circumstances, they would take proposals out of cycle, and I would myself consider this an extenuating circumstance. That's a decision that they make though, and I haven't seen them do that consistently since I've been going to Board of Fish meetings.
Yeah. Okay.
But that is absolutely like one of the big things that's preventing, I think is a huge barrier for the average person to get involved in this, just because there's nobody wants to go apply for permits that they might use once or twice, or if there's paperwork on the back end, like the aquatic resource permit that you would have to get to trap and keep European green crab, you have to report out at the end of the calendar year, which I'm more than happy to do it. I don't know if most people are though, so.
Yeah. Knowing what to do if you do find one, and maybe helping spread the word that they are here, but they're not like covering the beaches. I've had several conversations with people who think they're all over everywhere. But what they're thinking of is actually the breed shore crabs and are killing them, actually. So maybe helping spread the word that they're not on all of our beaches all over the place right now, and that there are native species here that we actually want to keep. So just helping like with the education portion of it, which doesn't feel like enough right now, but it's something to be helping with.
And then one other thing about like identification too, and we mentioned color a little bit, but like those, sometimes they're like black or orangish color. Melical Indian Community, their green crab Instagram page, which everybody should go follow. They caught a completely white European green crab. It wasn't like a molt, it was still alive. So that's why using those spines are like really your
I
only.
think they caught a blue one too.
It wouldn't shock me.
So, I mean, there's color variation. So, any more questions? Yes.
Might be too early to tell, but have we noticed any impacts on our own crabbing industry in the region?
Informally, I've heard that Chambliss Harbor doesn't seem to have as many Dungeness as it used to. And that's where they're catching most of the green crab on in that island reserve. So, but I don't know if that's like super well documented yet, but it seems like that might be what's happening over there. So, yeah.
What about Haida Gwaii? Have there been any effects since that's been a little longer? We've had 5 years. Have they seen any changes?
I can't speak to Haida Gwaii, but in Washington State, yes. They were having such a big impact, like I was saying earlier, they had to shut down the fishery and declared a state of emergency. So they could really focus on eradicating as many of them as possible. So in Washington, they were definitely impacted with Dungeness.
Have you heard of anyone using eDNA for early detection?
There is some eDNA, which is, we collect like a water sample, and any living thing is like shedding DNA in the water all the time. All cells that get loose from any living thing has DNA in it. And so you can get a water sample and do some DNA analysis on that to see what kind of species you have in the area. And people are working on that some with varying results. There's also some like genetic component to people like in Washington State that are doing stomach content genetics, which we think would be really interesting if we had the funding to do that. Would be really, so I don't know. Yeah.
It's an area that I'm looking into more because that happens. My background is in genetics, and so. But the eDNA, is problematic, as you might imagine, just because it's like a snapshot of anything in the water, which is like.
How localized can they get in the
Right.
Not very, and then they're amplifying it with PCR, and so there's just inherent to that process in the lab, whether you're talking about European green crab or you're talking about COVID or whatever it is you're talking about, what you're amplifying, you can get those false kind of positive results that are because you've taken a tiny bit that maybe floated in from wherever and you're amplifying it up, and it ends up giving you this reading back that, oh yes, they're here. And so Washington has used it for early detection. People are trying to kind of, fine tune it and troubleshoot, and maybe eventually it might be a good tool, but I think, as of right now, it's not a reliable.
I think you might be the person that you could really get more. She was working, Athenia was doing quite a bit, like, she was one that I knew was doing most of that here. So
actually, this was one of our challenges, actually more for her than us. So this is Iphigenia, and she's this. You can see the long hose coming in from the water to this pump right here at the bottom of the picture. So I'm looking at the leftmost picture. She was attempting to collect eDNA at that point, and just the pump was not functioning. I mean, a lot of lab work is
it was reading
mechanics,
too,
and technical difficulties, and so it was more just learning how to use the tools to do it correctly. But KIC is working on that.
KIC working on eDNA for cooling it and understand right now. So we're testing out this equipment, but once we know that there's presence there already, it's like too late for eDNA. And we're looking at some. It really does. Right now we focus on trapping and control. right?
Yeah.
To mitigate harm. We know it's here, so
Yeah.
that's really the purpose of eDNA, is to let us know if there's presence or absence. And in the marine environment, it's more difficult to control the ecosystem. So right now, I think we're beyond eDNA.
Here,
Here.
yeah, yeah.
Further up north of us, in northern,
Yeah.
southeast, or,
Wrangell Petersburg might want to.
you want to
Yeah.
do that, but for here, I mean, I'm just checking that you agree that we're at
Yeah,
the point
yeah,
where
yeah.
we're dealing with traffic, not eDNA covenants.
Good questions, yeah. Any more questions?
You said it was, they were on the top 100 invasive list?
Worst invasive species, yeah.
Those aren't ranked, then, eh?
So at a certain point, I think it's hard to compare them absolutely.
I
but
wonder how they
you-
compare to something like feral pig.
Yeah, that's a good
See
question.
Captain Cook, the first thing he did, let him go in Hawaii. Boy, they're there now.
Thank you all for coming and listening to us chat. I have got a couple of the carapaces here. I followed protocol and painted the inside of them with, what you do is when you're doing the survey too, is when you find them and you count them and you crush them so they're not recounted later. And since I kept these, because I have a permit to do that, you have to paint the inside of it with fingernail polish so it doesn't get recounted another time, because these are now for educational purposes. But if you'd like to see what the shells look like, these are ones that were found on beaches here in Ketchikan, and they're actually, they're weathered, and just like a crab will turn red when you put it in hot water to cook it, the shells will turn red in the hot sunlight as well. So that's actually a fairly large one, not as big as they get around here, but that's about the biggest that I found this summer. Quite a few of them are smaller than that. So there's a back, and then this one is actually a whole carapace. And they actually look different enough that on the day when I helped find 38 of them, I could tell that they were a green crab even if they were laying back down, just by the shape, the overall shape of the body and how long and attenuated kind of looking the legs were. So if anybody wants to come up and check these out, I have them right here. People can look at them. One of them lost
And
a
we'll
leg.
clap before we hold them.
Thank you.
Anybody can always, you can always reach out to me. My work email is on the UAS Ketchikan website, and if you don't already have that, and get more information, report things to me. I can help you know how to report them to Tammy, or I can make that report for you. So don't hesitate to reach out to me. Okay. And we'll catch y'all soon.
Have you been